Hi everyone, welcome back to the 7th and 8th grade video series. This is module number 5 talking about conclusions. So in this module, our objectives are to understand the purpose of a conclusion, understand what elements a strong conclusion includes, and also learn about the should and shouldn'ts of a conclusion. So before we begin, like with every video series, make sure to follow along with our 7th to 8th grade video series worksheet, which is linked on our website. So one of the most common questions writers ask is, what am I supposed to include in my conclusion, right? And the answer to that is that there's no single formula for what specifically you have to write. And your conclusion really depends on where your essay began, what it argued, and then what discipline you're writing in as well. So that being said, a strong conclusion usually does have 4 key things, and today we're going to walk through all 4 of them. So the first thing is, your conclusion should most likely restate your thesis in new words. So it should bring your readers back to your main argument, and this doesn't mean just copy and pasting your thesis from your introduction. Instead, you should rephrase it and show how your thinking has developed over the course of your essay. And really think of this as coming full circle. You remind readers where you started, but now you sound more confident, more informed, and more precise. The second thing is you should summarize the key points, but summarize them briefly. So this is not the place to repeat evidence or statistics or quotes. Instead, really focus on the big ideas and how they work together to support your argument. In a short paper, this might take 1 or 2 sentences, but in a longer paper, it might be a short paragraph. And when you're writing this part, you should really ask yourself, what are 2 or 3 key ideas that my reader should remember, and how do those ideas connect back to my thesis? And again, an important reminder is that a conclusion is a synthesis of your ideas rather than a list. The third part is you should explain the so what, or the significance and implications of your idea. You need to explain why this argument matters beyond the paper itself. So earlier in your introduction, you explained what was at stake. In your conclusion, you will return to these same stakes, but now you have the evidence and insight behind you. So really ask yourself, what changes if my argument is true? Who's affected by this understanding, and what assumptions does my paper challenge? The fourth part is you should end with a clincher or a final thought. So this is kind of like the now what part of your essay. So conclusions don't just look backwards, but they also look forward. And this last moment is really your chance to leave your reader with something to think about. It could be a call to action, a question for any future research, a broader application of your findings, a prediction about what comes next, or a final insight that really reframes your topic. The key idea is that the reader should finish your essay thinking that they see the issue differently now. And then putting it all together, we have a strong conclusion that typically includes these 4 things. First, the what, which is restate your thesis and summarize your core ideas. Second, the so what, so explain why your argument matters. And the third, the now what, which is leave the reader with a final insight, question, or implication. So you don't need all 4 of these elements in equal length, but together they really help your conclusion feel very purposeful and confident and complete. And when you write your conclusion, don't think about it as an afterthought, right? This is your final opportunity to really shape how your reader understands your argument and your paper and why it matters. So now let's talk about the should and shouldn'ts of your conclusion. So the shoulds are, again, what I went over on the previous slide, but I'll just summarize them again briefly. You should restate your thesis in new language, phrase it differently than you did in your introduction. Summarize your main points to remind your readers of what supported your thesis, but make sure to focus on the big picture aspects rather than just specific evidence or details. And third, emphasize why your argument matters and answer the so what part of your question. Things your essay shouldn't do is be a complete restatement of everything you just said, right? Your conclusion should not just reread like a condensed version of your entire paper. If you repeat everything, you aren't adding anything new. Secondly, it shouldn't introduce a major counter-argument that you can't address or you don't have the space to address. If a counter-argument is important, it should come earlier in the essay. And if you introduce it in your conclusion, it really weakens your ending and leaves the reader unconvinced. You're basically introducing a rebuttal right before you end. The third thing is you should never apologize for what you didn't include. So if the scope of your paper or essay needs explanation, that should ideally happen earlier and not at the end. Finally, we're going to analyze a conclusion, which is a very well-written conclusion, and see what it does well. So the first thing is, you can take a pause and read the conclusion, but the first thing is it restates the thesis in a new language. So the conclusion returns to the core ideas of biopolitics and immunity without restating that thesis verbatim. Secondly, it summarizes key points without being too detailed. it traces the trajectory of the argument. It talks about the Romantic period origins, the Victorian expansion through policy and public health, and then the 20th century shift due to global disease threats. And most importantly, it doesn't reintroduce evidence or case studies. So this is summary at an idea level. And the third thing it does well is it emphasizes the significance, or the so what. So the final sentence explains why the argument matters, which is biopolitical immunity is a useful framework for understanding modern medicine and politics, which effectively answers why the reader should care. What this conclusion avoids is that it does not restate the paper mechanically, it doesn't introduce a whole new counter-argument at the end, and it doesn't apologize for any limitations that it may have. Of course, practice makes perfect, so we have practice prompts provided on the worksheet on our website, www.wordupwriters.org. Thank you so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next video series.